incredibly excited to welcome Mr. Lockie Phillips on our show today. Lockie is the creator of emotional horsemanship, which is his perspective on horses and how to be with and train them. Lockie used to be a professional ballet dancer, and now he works professionally with horses. Lockie has been of huge inspiration to me and my horsemanship journey, and I am incredibly excited to dive into this conversation. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Reinforce the Horse. Today we have a very special guest today, Lockie Phillips from Emotional Horsemanship. Lockie, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you guys?
Doing well.
I'm doing well, yeah. So, Lockie, we are relatively new to your emotional horsemanship, and we've just been really inspired by the way that you approach working and being with horses. We've introduced you before bringing you on the show here, but would you just like to tell us a little bit more about yourself and perhaps how you started working with horses in the first place?
Cool. So, my name is Lockie Phillips. I'm an Australian who lives in Europe. I've lived in Europe for about 15 years, and Spain's now my home, and I intend to stick around in Spain for probably the rest of my life, but who knows? I am a retired professional classical ballet dancer, which I've talked about a lot on many other podcasts. So we can probably skip that storyline today and try and give you guys something interesting to listen to that I haven't said elsewhere. But I got into horses as a child and then left horses for a long time as an adolescent and a teenager. And then I came back to horses when I was 20. And it was something that I came back to in my 20s because I was in a place of stability and security in my professional career prior to this one. Such stability where I actually had time on my hands to do other things with my life. And first it started out as a hobby because it was the only thing I can remember being obsessed about before dance. First, horse riding, I took it up as a hobby, and then very, very quickly it lurched up out of the water like Jaws and grabbed me by the throat and dragged me deep under with it. You know how horses are, they just sort of snowball into your life, and that's what's happened. And from the very beginning with me, it was clear to me personally that I didn't want to take a standard or mainstream route into horses. Being a professional classically trained dancer, the easiest thing and the most obvious thing in the world for me to do would have been to subscribe to the whole classical dressage circuit because at a superficial level, it appears that those two things, ballet and dressage, are really similar. And yes, they are. And it is for that reason that I chose not to go that route. I wanted to understand why horses were doing things, not just what to do to get what I want, but why horses do what they do. That was my primary question at the beginning, and it is the main question I ask today, and it's the main answer I give to people. When people ask me training questions, 7 times out of 10, my answer to them is find out why the horse is doing that, and that will tell you the answer of what you should do to resolve it. So I was really interested in that from the beginning and found my way into a wonderful relationship with a training stable in Poland where they certified me as a horse trainer, a riding instructor, and a hoof care provider. They certified me in these 3 things. And I had the painful realization in my mid-20s that I had more to offer horses than I would to offer dance. And so I decided to surrender to that. And here I am in my 30s, and horses are my full-time job for many years now. and I wouldn't change it for the world.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Is there a favorite horse that you have, a horse that has taught you, I don't know, a lot of life lessons or whatever, just a very special horse in your life that you'd like to share?
Thanks for asking about that. My favorite horses are horses. I like all horses. I like all breeds. I love donkeys. I have a real soft spot for mules. I really like minis. I really like giraffes. I love dressage horses. I love jumping horses. I love Appaloosas and quarter horses and Spanish horses. I just love all horses. However, my personal horse, the first horse that I purchased as my own. They say that you get that one special horse in your lifetime, and I hit the jackpot from the very beginning that my once in a lifetime horse is the first horse that I bought, and I've known him for about 10 years. And I retrained him from scratch in my own methods, and he's really the cornerstone of my work. He is a half Andalusian, half Breton French draft horse. He's a really nice saddle horse. He's a really good teacher. He's a really good friend to me. And I'd be nothing without him. He was a real problem horse as a youngster, as the storyline often goes. People who were much more experienced with horses and more knowledgeable with horses than me were just not succeeding with him. He just kept getting more and more dangerous. And one day I appeared in his life and they asked me to work with him. I had no idea the problems he had had. And from the very first session, he just sat in my back pocket and wanted to do anything I wanted to do. He just chose me in a way. And this horse has essentially totally upended my life and reformed my life in his image. So my whole life is revolving around him. And he's not letting up soon. And because of him, I now have 4 horses in my life that are mine and a thriving small business. And yeah, he's my extra special buddy. But I want to make it real clear that I love all horses of all types, of all ages, all genders, and all backgrounds. I really, truly do.
I think that's me too. And I can't speak for Alyssa, but I have a hunch it's her too.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So you said about kind of retraining this horse. Did you begin training in the sort of typical ways, and then did you have an epiphany of sorts where you shifted your focus in the ways of training to develop your emotional horsemanship process, or did you start?
That's a really great question. That's a really great question. Yeah. So I know this might be unrelatable, but I'm not one of these people whom trained in a certain way, in a fixated way for a long period of time, then had some sort of breakthrough, breakdown, or epiphany, and then suddenly changed. I'm not one of these people. I realized for myself, because I returned to horses as a free-thinking, conscious, independent adult whom was able to make conscious decisions about what sort of education I got. And because I was not in a rush to learn anything, because I wasn't in a rush with horses, I learned very quickly, which is the irony. And because I was conscious in choosing my education with horses, I chose the path I wanted from the very beginning, the path that felt in alignment and congruent with my soul, in alignment and congruent with my sense of morality and sense of purpose and sense of right versus wrong. So do I regret the things I did of training in the past? No, because I was always doing the best that I knew how at that point in time. And I've never had like a sudden cliff that I've come to where I had to jump off the cliff or turn back. It's always been a pretty smooth progression from the very, very beginning, at least in a horse training capacity. My original certification was in very broad spectrum natural horsemanship, which also involved elements of horse assisted education. I also had a mentor in Australia who was Australia's premier positive sports performance psychologist. So I had that background as well. I also studied elements of equine body work, equine lameness rehabilitation, trauma rehabilitation. I studied elements of Portuguese classical dressage. I studied bridleless riding and cordeo neck rope riding. So I had a really broad education. And I've always used the horse as my compass rather than some sort of guru or some sort of methodology from the outside world. I was always looking at the horse in front of me and thinking, why are they doing what they're doing? And what does this horse need to get to a mutual goal that we can both feel good about? So the process of retraining Sanson was always driven by what he needed at that time relative to what I knew at that time. Would I start a horse today in the same way I retrained Sanson? I can put my hand to God and say, foundationally, 100%. But there are a few elements that I would include, like more nuances, more techniques that are more specific for certain things rather than generalizing or blundering through an issue. I've got now more specific techniques, more tools in my toolbox than what I had when I retrained him. But the foundational tools are still the bedrock tools. They have developed over time and improved, but I just sort of cherry pick whatever works and put to the sidelines whatever's not working. That's what my mentor in positive sports performance psychology taught me, that we can motivate our performance ambitions and development not based on what's wrong with us, but based on what's going right in us, for us, with us. So what's the positive stuff? Let's focus on maximizing on the positives, being aware of the negative, but not engaging with the negative. So the process of retraining Sanson was pretty, painstaking, and I really took my time, and his training continues to this day. And just like any horse, I truly believe that their training never stops. It's like brushing the teeth. There are certain things you need to do every day so that the horse stays clean and tight and good and happy. And there are certain things that a horse will learn once and remember forever. And it's like a wonderful painting that you're never quite finished with. And the painting's not static. The painting responds to you. And the painting has its own seasons of its life and its own desires and responses and its own ideas and contributions. So I really enjoy that process with the horse. I really enjoy training them. I just really enjoy that.
That's such a beautiful analogy. The thought of a living painting, very dynamic in nature. That's certainly been our experience as well.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I can totally piggyback on that. They're incredible to watch, and I have come to find recently that there's not an insane amount of people out there that will listen to the horse 100% and pretty much ask them, what do you want to do? And so it's incredible to hear that and see that from you. Hey, can you talk a little bit more about trauma rehabilitation with the horses?
Well, goodness, it's a big subject. What would you like to know specifically about it?
How you started it and around like where you are with it now, like what the draw was.
Okay, great question. Okay, so it started for me about 10, 11 years ago. I had zero money because when you're a professional dancer, the money is not fierce. So I had zero money, but I really had this draw towards horses that was just magnetic. I just couldn't not follow it. And so I was looking for opportunities to get more and more work experience with horses, particularly during my summer holidays. Every theater in the world closes during the summer for 2, sometimes even 3 months. So you've got 2 or 3 months of your year where you're not at work and you're supposed to be on holiday resting your body. Instead of resting your body, I took myself down to the south of Spain, to the area where I live now, and found a very rough and ready backcountry trail riding trekking center that would take volunteers and working holidays. So you would work in exchange for a tent, an outdoor kitchen, and some vegetables. And you would prepare your own food, and you'd have opportunities to work with the horses, and they would give you food and boarding of some kind. They even accommodated people in horse trailers, which is highly illegal, but they were doing it anyway. So I would spend my summers in the south of Spain in the mountains, living in a tent, working with these trekking horses. Now, because this place was sort of a budget trekking center, budget for me because I couldn't afford anything more. I couldn't afford going on a holiday where I was paying for a hotel. I couldn't afford staying in my hometown, well, the town where I was employed, because I wasn't getting a salary during the summer holidays. So I had to go somewhere where I could feed myself. And I thought, why not volunteer down at this horse place? Because I love horses. I'll be able to eat. I've got somewhere to stay, and I'm getting professional experiences and training. And so they had between 25 and 30 horses on this place. All of them were Spanish horses. Some of them were prestigious horses. Some of them were not. They had ponies and drafts and Andalusians and Arabians and Arabian crosses, Hispano-Arabs. And that's actually where I met my special horse, Sanson. Sanson was at this trekking center. That's where I met him. And he was a failed trekking horse. He didn't succeed in that environment. And this was a very unique place. I don't work there or associate with them anymore because a lot of the practices I saw were, in my professional and humble opinion, highly problematic. However, I am really grateful for the experiences I had there because it was a masterclass in trauma rehabilitation. It was a masterclass in horsemanship. Because no one was micromanaging you. The proprietor of the place, she was a very experienced and very good quality horsewoman, but got little time with her horses because of her life. And she would rely on this army of volunteers, and she would collect good volunteers, and she would pay for their flights to have them return every summer. So I became one of these volunteers that would be paid for to come every summer and work with the horses, because I was demonstrating horse after horse after horse the horses were having problems, but with me, they didn't have problems. And so that was really my trial by fire. It was quite literally being thrown into the deep end. So imagine this. You've got all of these horses were not expensive horses. This woman wouldn't spend more than €1,000 on a horse. And in Spain, €1,000 gets you old horses, highly behavioral, very dangerous horses, or very young horses. That's what you get for that kind of money. So this is what I was working with. Imagine a 5-year-old Hispano-Arab, so Andalusian cross Arab, who is fed pounds and pounds of sweet feed, kept in a small corral, shod, and then taken for gallops up a mountain until they're fitter than you can ever imagine. And now imagine that this horse doesn't know how to stand still, and they can't be mounted without a team of people holding them still. I mean, so problematic, but this is where I was working. And my job was to take care of the horses, school the horses, guide the mountain trails safely with clients behind you who had varying skill sets and skill levels, usually not very good skill sets, and take horses for their first trails if they were inexperienced. So this is what I was doing, and I encountered a lot of really traumatized horses. I remember one mare in particular, beautiful, beautiful unicorn, white Andalusian, just gorgeous. And when she arrived at the farm, her owner was leading her down the driveway with a chain over her tongue, yanking, yanking, yanking on her tongue and whipping her as she was coming down the trail. And this mare wanted nothing to do with men in particular. And my job was to work on that over a summertime. And she had a number of soundness issues, which I identified, and working with these horses to see how much pain that they were in, mentally, physically, emotionally, and to try and help them feel better, at least for a moment. I couldn't change their home or their prospective job that was in front of them, which was very hard work trekking in the mountains. I couldn't change that for them. But for that moment while they were with me, I could give them a gentle ride. I could give them a kind and forgiving hand and seat. I could help them feel safe in their body. I could help them regulate their emotions. I could help them understand their nervous system. I could help them feel safe and relaxed and supported. And that's really where I got into trauma rehabilitation. And I'm so glad you asked me, Alyssa, because it's something I've never really talked about before. And I haven't talked about it before because I still live in the same area of this ranch. And plain fact is, I saw a lot of problematic things with the horses. I saw a lot of really, really, really good stuff with the horses too. But lock, stock, and barrel, I don't associate because I just couldn't anymore. And so that's why I've refrained from discussing my experiences there and don't even write about those work experiences on social media or my website, because I've tried to respect their reputation. But now I've come to the understanding that their reputation will not be affected by my personal experiences, my professional experiences up there. They'll keep doing what they're doing, and I'm going to do what I'm doing. But I'm also allowed to discuss where I've been and what I've done. So that was really my masterclass in trauma rehabilitation.
Thank you for sharing that on the trauma front. It brought to mind a question about, our own personal traumas. Do you find that horses have helped you or even people that you know in ways surrounding processing through their own internal personal trauma?
Yeah, they obviously do. I had a friend who once said to me that horses tend to attract people who need therapy, and I think that's true. And I studied modalities of horse-assisted education, which was like personal development, communication, and leadership workshops using horses as mirrors for your emotional, physiological, and behavioral state. It wasn't horse training, it was horses were the coaches that would give you that feedback. Horses have, in my experience and understanding, an empathetic superpower. And we have this superpower as well, yet we have suppressed this superpower because of human social conditioning and expectations in human education. And the way we are expected to utilize our very unique brain has suppressed this. But we still have this superpower. It just lies dormant in most of us. And those really good horse people have, in my opinion, released this superpower. Whether they are aware of it or not, whether they can teach that to others or not, doesn't matter. They have usually released this superpower. Today, you can imagine with a methodology of training called emotional horsemanship, I get a lot of contact from people who do trauma-informed horsemanship. They conflate the two and they connect the two. And I certainly can understand why someone would connect the two. Every month I get interested persons introducing themselves and saying that they run personal coaching and trauma-informed human coaching with horses as the therapists in some sort of part of the world, and they invited me to collaborate or contribute. And I'm really clear that my business is about horses. And I'm interested in horsemanship and horse training. I'm very clear that I draw a hard boundary when it comes to using horses as therapists. And I draw that boundary because I don't, in my experience, and I have seen these modalities, in my experience, it is very difficult on the horses to do this. And I believe it is a slight misappropriation. And please don't come after me if I offend anyone for saying this. You do you. But in my opinion, it's a mild exploitation of horses. As far as the scale of seriousness and exploitation, it's way down low on the list, but it's still making the horse a tool that humans use. And it still has very little to do about being selfless and understanding how horses can fit into our lives if we move beyond selfish means. This is how most people tend to approach their horsemanship. They ask a simple question, and the question usually is, how do I get what I want? And it starts and stops there. That's generally speaking the amount of curiosity you'll see from a lot of horse people. And it wears all different types of hats. It can wear the dressage hat. It can wear the competitive hat. It can wear the trail riding hat. It can wear the trauma-informed horsemanship and human coaching hat. But it's still about, how can I get what I want? And then there are a number of people who've realized that they should be going, well, they can be going a little bit deeper, and horses have more to offer to us than just a tool for us to use. And so they've developed that into a next phase, which is, how do I get what I want and do that in the best way for the horse, right? Which is a really great start, but I believe we can snowball this so that it's even more refined. So how about we ask, what does the horse need? What does the horse want? And what do I need? And what do I want? And how can we bring those two things together? That's really what I'm interested in. So though I believe trauma recovery and trauma rehabilitation, horses can play a really important role in that, just trail riding or riding a horse is such good exercise that it's bound to lift your spirits and lift your mood. And I myself personally have turned to horses in my life because I was surrounded by a lot of really shitty people, and I didn't like being around shitty people. So I was around a lot of really crappy interpersonal relationships, and I've got a really low tolerance for crappy interpersonal relationships. So I turned to horses because they're just easier to get along with than most people. A horse has never been rude to me for no good reason. A horse has never violated my boundaries for no good reason. And usually the horses that are quote unquote rude or quote unquote do violate boundaries usually do that because it's been created by a human. So I go to horses because I find them easier to get along with than most people. And I think that's the storyline for most horse people. And so how about we form a horse training methodology and equestrian community based around that, rather than how do I use the horses to get what I want, right? Wanted behavior, correct behavior. Well, that's all about us. But what about what's correct to the horse? What about what they want from us? So I really try to be, and I wish I was better at it. I really try to be every horse's dream horse owner. If a horse could dream about the perfect owner that would love them and care for them and provide for them, I really try to be that for them. And then everything else is the cherry on top.
That is absolutely beautiful. That is totally like resonating with me in so many ways. Have you always been this way as a horse person?
Yes. I'm sorry. I know that's maybe not relatable because we're all supposed to be on this journey from a crappy past into a brighter future, but I have always been this way as a horse person. I'm not saying that I was perfect from the
That
beginning.
is incredible.
Far from it. I've got so much to learn. I have so much to learn. So much to learn. And every day I show up to my horses, every day that I'm not overextended, and I can show up to my horses because my life's a little crazy behind the scenes at this moment in time. But every time I go to my horses or go to any horse anywhere, they challenge me and they push me to learn something and they make me think and they make me investigate and I get curious and I create solutions and I implement techniques. So when I say that I've always been this way with horses, I'm not bigging myself up or leading with an ego. I'm really saying that I've always considered the horse's point of view as paramount before absolutely anything else. And then I come to them as their student. And I have never been in a situation where I was using a horse and I knew it was inappropriate and I continued to do it anyway. I've never been in that situation.
That's incredible. Can you tell us a little bit more about maybe a few lessons that you learned from your horse Sanson?
Oh my goodness. So Sanson, his primary lesson for every human being is the following. His primary lesson is that you are allowed to take up space in the world. And his ability to cooperate with you is directly in correlation to your ability to take up space in your body, reclaim your personal agency, and be confident and sure of yourself in the world. What he doesn't do, what Sanson really doesn't like and really won't work with, is timidity and inertia in a person. But at the same time, he has a zero tolerance policy for dominating tactics, overbearing micromanagement. So you've got to learn how to be strong and soft at the same time with this horse. So he was my master teacher in that, because he absolutely will do absolutely nothing for you if you come timid, if you come stuck, if you come retracted within yourself and expect the horse to make up all the distance and to just serve it to you on a silver platter. He's not going to give you anything for free. He's like driving a stick shift. He doesn't give anything automatic. You've got to earn it. You've got to know what you're asking for. But more than technically knowing what you're doing, you have to be fully realized as a human being. But if you go outside of yourself and take things from him and micromanage him or be harsh on him or scare him or confuse him chronically, because he's very good with short-term confusion, but long-term confusion he's bad with, then he will also give you unequivocal information that you are highly inappropriate and you better get out of here. So long story short, he's kind of a diva, this horse, and he is very demanding on me, and he's not easy to ride, even if he maybe looks easy to work with when you see videos of us together. He's not easy to work with. He challenges me all the time, and we've been together 10 years now, and it's been really wonderful to see the seasons of his life so far. And Sanson's going nowhere. Many years ago, I looked at him and I said, one day I'm going to buy a beautiful farm and I'm going to build you a stable that is perfect for you. And you will live out the rest of your days there. And then you'll be buried in the fields and I'll plant a tree. And next week we move into that farm. And he's not going anywhere. I would actually I would accept no amount of money for this horse. No amount of money. All my horses aren't going anywhere. I don't sell horses. So the horses that are in my life, I make a commitment that they're with me right up until the end. Right up until the end.
That's exactly how we are. We just brought home our third. She's a Mustang, and part of our existing Mustang, or our first Mustang's herd. And so it's kind of like an attempt to reunite family members, if you will. But we're working on that, and we mostly just like hanging out with the horses, and we do train, and we're still new and learning that sort of what style makes sense or whatnot, and just we spent a lot of time just building friendship, and kind of I guess what most people would kind of think of as like they would with a dog, say, that sort of camaraderie that I haven't found to be very prevalent when it comes to horses. It seems like a lot of people are more superficial that way. Like,
well, I have a slightly different perspective on that, if I may volunteer that information. So at this point in history, Jason, we are at a really unique crossroads in the horse-human relationship and the horse-human storyline. And we have experienced one whole century since the Industrial Revolution, which gave us the steam and petrol-powered engine, and horses drastically, suddenly, within a very short period of time, ended their main role in the advancement of human society and human civilization. They ended their role and their mechanical role, you can say. We no longer need the horses to pull the carts to the village on Sunday market. We no longer need horses for transport. We no longer need horses for so many things, except in some very fringe communities where horses are still the preferred partnership for agricultural means, for ranching. But these are still, by and large, very, very isolated communities now, whereas 100 years ago and before, they were the mainstream. They are now the fringe, but they are the fringe, but still behaving like they are the mainstream. That's a different subject. I digress. So horses are now no longer agricultural components. They are no longer industrial elements. And we have had 40, 50 years where horses pivoted into sport. They had become a sporting equipment. But now the question of the social license to operate with the deplorable horsemanship on display at high-level competitions all over the world, that's just objective fact, that's coming into question now too. So you guys, just like me, are part of a huge groundswell of horse-loving folk who want to have horses in their lives, but we have no cultural paradigm to follow anymore. We have no one to look up to anymore. We look to the ranchers and we say, yeah, my horse doesn't have to be on the payroll tomorrow cutting cows, okay? So I don't need to use those fast-track, high-pressure techniques to get my horse ready by tomorrow. Then we look at the high sport riders and we say, yeah, I don't need my horse to have that much tension, and I don't need my horse to piaffe as if their life depends on it. So, like, I can't look up to that anymore either. So here we are in the middle, and we're like, well, what do we do? And then you said yourself, Jason, well, we just hang out. And sometimes people hang out, and I love to hang out too. Hang out, hang out, hang out. We love it. However, the big pity and the missed opportunity would be if we didn't seize this moment in time with both hands and reclaim our personal agency and ambition as horse people without making it about ranching modalities. I'm not hating on ranching modalities, but the facts remain that there are practices of training which are designed to rapidly transform a green horse into a string-ready ranch horse within a very short period of time. No rancher necessarily can get a horse under saddle and take 5 years to do that. They need to do that in one spring. And then once the horse is under saddle, they then spend the rest of their life fine-tuning that horse. And the end result of a ranch horse, a good ranch horse, is one of the best things you'll ever see in your entire life. Same reason for good sport horses, one of the best things you'll ever see in your entire life. However, we are not ranching our horses. We are not competing our horses. But does that mean we're not allowed to be ambitious? No. Does that mean we can't develop high degree of skill with our horses? No. So I'm really interested in trying to push our, quote unquote, our community forward into reclaiming your ambition if you want to, and to develop your horse, train your horse, gain skills, abilities, and techniques without excessive pressure, excessive force, and without selfish focuses on human services, but based on the pure relationship between you and your horse. I don't know anyone who doesn't secretly desire that, and I think that's what we got into horses for in the first place. When I was a 5-year-old kid with horses on my brain and my walls covered with horse drawings, I wasn't imagining, oh my God, if I could only get a perfect score on my half passes and lead changes. If only I could have a 17-hand Black Dutch warm blood and have one-time tempi changes. That's not what I was dreaming of. I was dreaming of a beautiful relationship with a horse that we could do so much together because we loved each other. And I think that's what people look for. Now, some governments in the world are waking up to this, fast-tracked, of course, by the pandemic. France, for example, last year, changed their legislation to categorize horses not as agricultural livestock animals, but as companion animals with the same rights and protections as a cat or a dog. So France changed that law last year because during the pandemic, there were all of these people the primary horse ownership market in Europe is the recreational market as companion animals. That's what most people have horses for in Europe. And during the pandemic, everyone was confined to their homes. And the government realized, oh my God, there are tens, hundreds of thousands of horses in livery barns, boarding barns across our country. And we have a law that's preventing their caregivers from giving them care. Because the only people who were permitted to go and care for livestock animals were registered farmers. But no one who owns horses anymore are registered farmers. And they realized that the horses were sitting in a logistical and legislative gray area, and they rose to the challenge and they fixed it. And I'm really hoping that this will be a tidal wave, a tsunami that's going to slowly roll out changes. There'll be bastions of conservativeness that will hold on to the bitter ends to what was done 100 years ago, but it's always going to be that way in every human sphere. However, I'm really excited to be representing the recreational horse owner. I don't say amateur because I believe that's patronizing and abusive to them. I say recreational because they have horses for no other purpose than as a companion animal, a hobby, and a beautiful, sublime, lifelong pursuit, like someone would take up painting in their spare time or sport in their spare time. And it doesn't mean they don't get good at it. They can get very good at it, but they don't need to be masters. They don't all need to be professional, but they would like to do it well and to have a good time whilst they're doing it. And I would like that the horses have a good time. So that's who I really try to represent. And that's who I try to serve and speak to almost exclusively. Yeah.
Do you think the kinder, gentler approaches, so to speak, can be used to facilitate training in those harsher conditions?
Yeah. So you've got harsher conditions and you've got discipline-specific conditions. It's really important that we are able to draw a very clear distinction between abusive training and discipline-specific training. So I'm really clear on that difference. If you're just doing discipline-specific training, for example, you have a quarter horse and their job is to go from green 3-year-old into ranch ready on the payroll, cutting cow, moving herds by the summertime. If that's their job, you don't have to tie them to a post, blindfold them, and whip them until they fall over and stop kicking. That is abusive practices. That's not discipline-specific practice. It's not good horsemanship no matter which way you slice it. It's only abusive. So I'm not speaking about abusive training because I don't believe they deserve any more of my time or energy or attention or a platform or a spotlight. So when it comes to discipline-specific training that is not abusive, 100%, almost every, 100% kindness, patience, understanding, science, empathy, feel, these things can improve almost any discipline-specific practice and in fact make the training faster in some circumstances because there are a lot of not abusive practices, just a little bit crappy practices that maybe push the horses into their thresholds and not respect the gray area, but push them way into flooding, where if you're flooding a horse, you're now creating a problem that you've got to then go back and fix. And if you didn't create that problem in the first place entirely, then you're not wasting time fixing things later. So there's a lot you can do to not create problems so that you're having an easier time in training. Raising them right is really important. The more I go into this world, the more I'm convinced that ages birth through 4 years old, that horse's storyline from ages birth through 4 years old is absolutely crucial to their long-term training success and how they will form themselves as an adult. And the kinder you are, the clearer you are, and the more species appropriate you are in all things, can only improve those horses' lives. So if we talk about discipline specific, my discipline that I serve is the recreational horse owner that wants a very, very versatile, safe family horse that they can kind of do almost anything with, depending upon the horse's biomechanical soundness and talents, that but they can more or less take that horse anywhere and kind of do anything with them. That's who I'm serving. I'm not necessarily serving the sport horse market, though I do get some people coming in from that discipline who kind of want to transfer some of my practices and augment it for a sport environment. And I work with that. So there is a Venn-gram overlap, right? And then I do work with some ranching people and competitive Western people. I have clinics in those environments as well. So there's always an overlap, but you've got to know when to step back and defer to someone's discipline-specific training. But no discipline-specific training at any level should represent abuse, period.
Totally agree.
Yes, 100%. Hey, Lockie, what's your favorite way to reinforce your horse?
My favorite way to reinforce a horse is when they have found the reinforcement inside of themselves. When they do something and they feel pleased in themselves about what they did. Pride. Not my pride, their sense of satisfaction, their sense of internal motivation, their sense of self-actualization and contentment is my favorite way to reinforce the horse. That would be where I would start on a hierarchy of reinforcement protocol. And then I would trickle down from there into operant conditioning, external reinforcement protocols. And when it comes to operant conditioning, my favorite would be a variable interval reinforcement schedule, be that through pressure or through food. Scientifically, it's the same. I try to use non-escalating pressure wherever possible, unless I'm in a dangerous or safety-stricken scenario. But yeah, number one would be the horse's sense of satisfaction and pride, I think.
Can you give us maybe one glimmer as to how you recognize that? Or would it, I assume it would.
That's a really
vary
good question.
depending on the
That's a
horse.
really good question. That's a really good question. And my answer is going to be really annoying and dissatisfying to people who are looking for a gross behavioral marker that tells them, oh, A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. The problem with marking behavioral actions only, I'm not a behaviorist, right? I don't pretend to be a behaviorist. I want to move beyond behaviorism. So the problem with behaviorism is that with horses, sometimes 1 + 1 = 42, and nobody knows why. Because there's an internal component that we don't see, we can't see, we can only feel. So when you know your horse, when you know them, and you've spent time around them, their nervous system leaves an imprint in your nervous system, the same way a human would, a cat would, a dog would, a tree would, a house would, a country would, a society would leave an imprint in your nervous system like a piece of a puzzle. And when you are connected to your horse, you will be able to feel when that horse is happy, even if the horse is standing glass still and giving zero behavior. You will feel what the horse is feeling. Now, that requires huge self-awareness, because if you're not self-aware, then you're like a leaking ship. Your feelings get confused as the horse's feelings. When I'm around a horse, I'm very clear on the difference between what I'm feeling that belongs to me and what I'm feeling in my nervous system that is coming from the horse and that belongs to them. And I have that distinction because I have studied self-awareness practices from my mentor from the positive sports performance psychology. And in my foundation online course, Emotional Horsemanship, the first thing I teach the people practically is not something with the horse, but self-awareness practices. Because otherwise you're like a leaking ship and you won't be able to tell the difference between what the horse is feeling and what you're feeling. You've got to have that aspect in place first. If you've got that aspect in place first, then reading behavior will never be confusing to you, and you won't need to be reading these dictionaries that tell you an ear placed forward means this, an eye with 2 wrinkles means that, an eye with 4 wrinkles means that, a lip with 3 wrinkles means this, a head at 32 degrees to the left means that you won't have to memorize the horse like a machine. You'll be able to recognize them as a living, breathing, sentient creature that has thoughts and feelings, and you'll be able to feel what they feel. If you don't have any feel inside yourself, if you're a shutdown person, then there are things you can do to waken that up, because we all have this. We all have this component in our bodies, whether it's dormant or not. And so personal development is inextricably linked with quality empathetic horsemanship. It's not possible to walk through the world like a machine and be able to feel empathetically what your horse is feeling. It's not possible. Just not possible. So what I'm not going to do is to tell people something like this. When your horse lifts their head above the withers and opens their eyes wide but not so wide, and when they are standing square on all 4 feet, this equals the horse is proud in themselves. That is not what I'm going to do, because I believe that is emotionally and intelligently infantile. I believe it's an immature way of looking at a horse, and I believe we can go further, we can go deeper, we can be more intelligent about our horsemanship. So I will tell people to explore the outer reaches of your nervous system and try to feel the horse when you are around them. If you've ever been in a situation with people where you're in a group of people and then someone else walks into the room, and when that person walks into the room, they just change the energy of the room. They light the room up or they bring the room down. That is your empathetic superpower, picking up on what that person is feeling, and you can do the same thing with a horse. So every time I'm around a horse, I tune into what my body's telling me about the horse, and then I start to feel what they're feeling. And it's like mirror neurons. There's actually research in this stuff. This isn't just woo-woo psychobabble. This isn't just my crazy idea. There's actually research on this stuff now, and we're getting more and more research coming down the pipeline with it. So, yeah, maybe not the answer you expected, but it's the best one I've got for you.
Not being around so many horses in my life, and we found really quickly that the way that we were taught initially just was not correct. And for me personally, I'm not even speaking for Alyssa here, but for me personally, the more I did inner work on myself, the more I was able to see, feel, get, and hear our horses. And they reciprocate that in such a way that's a beautiful sort of symphony as you work it out. So yeah, personal development, for me, it's been like a very definite sort of meditation practice, and developing my own intuitiveness and coming out of my own personal shutdown that I've had for decades of life. And it's all tied into even spirituality and how that applies to, working with the horses is just fantastic. So I really appreciate
100%.
Expressing it
Most
that way.
men, most men tend to live lives of quiet despair. Most men tend to live lives of quiet despair, and it's amazing to watch horsemen and women tackling this. And I found that beginners are sometimes the best people at this empathy piece, because they haven't been gaslighted, controlled, or brainwashed by a mainstream practice that taught them that empathy was anthropomorphic and inappropriate and incorrect. They haven't been taught that, so they don't have that habit. And so they've never been around a horse, and that actually makes them pure in a way. I remember my very first lesson at the Horsemanship Center where I did my certification. So my very first lesson with them, I was actually watching the lesson. They said, you're going to watch this one and then we're going to teach you second. And as I was watching, they were giving a double lesson on the same horse. So 2 girls, 1 horse. With the first girl, I hadn't been around horses since a small child. There I am watching my first lesson at this stable. And with the first rider, this mare was very comfortable, moving out, nice and easy. And with the second mare, she was just tight, and the second human, she was just tight and stiff and worried and not working right. And I turned around to my coaches at the time, and I said, this horse likes that first rider a lot more. And they said, well, how could you tell? I said, it's obvious. It's obvious if you watch the horse move. She's no different to us. If she'd given you a Willy Wonka's golden ticket with the reasons on it, she couldn't have been more clear, right? And so I've often found that beginners are really, really good at recognizing this because they're unspoiled and they're fresh. And so I love working with beginners. It's one of my favorite things to do. One of the trickiest thing to do is to work with a deeply experienced horse person that's very attached to what they do and has a really bad relationship to change. That is the hardest person to work with. So the fact that you're new to this, Jason, I see as a huge plus for you and for your horses.
Very cool. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, definitely.
So, where can people reach out to you or get in touch with you? I think it's is it emotionalhorsemanship.com?
Yeah, so my website's the best place to start. You can head over to emotionalhorsemanship.com. There's a contact page there and lots of information. And all of my services are shown there. You can also find me on YouTube, on Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon. But if you don't know how to get to those, you can find all of those through my website.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lockie, for talking with us today. We really appreciate it. We enjoyed the conversation. Hope you did too. And everybody here listening, thank you so much for listening. And we will see you on the next adventure.
Thanks, guys.